So I came across an interesting mock draft earlier today that I want to go over and give some thoughts on this potential idea. So it was from Joel Klatt of Fox Sports. He put out a whole mock draft. I'll leave it linked in the description section down below. But here we have the Packers draft selection. Green Bay Packers, Oregon offensive tackle Josh Conerly Jr. He says, after addressing the offensive line in the first round last year, the Packers continue to bolster their offensive line here. Green Bay can address a few different areas, but you better be able to protect your quarterback if you want to win at the highest level. I like Jordan Love, so protecting him is imperative. And so I think when we look at the Packers' first round, a lot of it has been, a lot of mock drafts I've seen, and the biggest needs I think right now are edge rusher, corner, potentially receiver. But when you do look at the Packers' offensive line, the idea of the Packers drafting an offensive lineman in back-to-back years, because last year, round one, Packers draft, tackle Jordan Morgan. He didn't play a ton, dealt with an injury. And so would they really draft another offensive tackle in back-to-back years? And I think, honestly, this wouldn't be very surprising. Just when you look at the status of some of these other Packers offensive linemen and where they are with their contracts, Rasheed Walker only has 1 year left on his deal, his rookie deal. Same with Sean Rhyan. So both of those guys are going to be free agents. The Packers will have to make that decision if they want to keep them around. And then when you factor in Zach Tom, who has been close to the best Packers offensive lineman, probably Elton Jenkins is better, but Zach Tom, when it comes to tackles, is one of the better tackles in the league. The Packers are probably going to pay Zach Tom a lot of money this offseason. I assume they'll give him some kind of a large extension. And so the fact that you're already paying Elton Jenkins a lot of money, you're going to have to pay Zach Tom a lot of money sometime soon. I'm not too sure that Rasheed Walker is going to be someone that the Packers rely on for the long term. When you look at some of his stats, according to PFF, of tackles who played at least 1,000 snaps last year, there were 31 of them. He's 18th in pressures allowed, 25th in hurries allowed, tied for 9th in sacks allowed, tied for 13th in hits allowed. So he's been okay. I wouldn't say he's been great. I'd say he's been more of an average type tackle. And so the question is, do the Packers want to keep him around as their starting left tackle in 2025? Or do they want, and then sign him to a long-term deal after the year, which could be somewhat expensive. I don't think he'll get, top tier tackle money, but it could be pretty expensive. Or do they want to draft another tackle and prepare for that person to take over for Rasheed Walker? And so that's where it gets interesting, just because Jordan Morgan, was a tackle in college. And so he could technically be the one to potentially fill in for Rasheed Walker if he's not in the Packers' long-term plans. But considering the Packers played Jordan Morgan a ton at guard, and he wasn't even really competing for left tackle early on in training camp, I wonder if they see him as a long-term guard instead. And so that's where this guy, if we look at Josh Conerly here, Oregon tackle Josh Conerly, I have another excerpt here from Bill Huber that talks about him a little bit. It says here, at the Senior Bowl, he was voted the best offensive lineman on the national squad by the American team's defensive linemen and linebackers. I think Josh Conerly might wind up being the best left tackle, NFL draft analyst Todd McShay said on the Bill Simmons podcast. He is unbelievably athletic with the way that he moves. He's gotten better with his hands. I think there's a chance he's going to be a star from this class. And so Conerly played left tackle. He played 28 games the past 2 years at Oregon, and he only allowed 2 sacks in those 28 games. So he's a very, very solid tackle. And the thing is, if the Packers were to draft him, there's no doubt that he needs to be starting on the O-line, as a round one guy somewhat soon. Same with Jordan Morgan. I don't think if you're the Packers, unless you suddenly gave up on Jordan Morgan, which I don't think the Packers have at all, you'd want to see your first rounder as a starter on the O-line. And so if the Packers don't see Jordan Morgan as their future left tackle, they could draft someone like Conerly, and then that would probably mean that Morgan would be a long-term guard. And so then you ask the question, what would the Packers do there? Are they going to keep Josh Myers at center? Because if you look at his stats, they weren't great last year. Among centers with 1,000 snaps, there were 21 of them. He had the third most pressures allowed, fourth most hurries allowed, second most hits allowed, tied for 14th most sacks allowed. And so I'm I had been leaning towards Josh Myers returning just because of Brian Gutekunst's comments about he thought he was growing. He thought that, him and Jordan Love have a great connection. And I think that those could be reasons for him to stay. But when you look at some of his production, it hasn't been great. So I wouldn't be completely shocked if he moved on. If he did, the Packers could potentially move Jenkins to center, could move Sean Rhyan to center. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here. Zach Tom, even if they wanted to, even though I think he's probably more valuable on the outside. And so all in all, I don't think drafting a tackle is a bad idea, just because I do think that the Packers could get better play than Rasheed Walker. The question becomes, what's your plan for Jordan Morgan if you're already going to draft another tackle here in the first round? So, as I said, I don't think it would be that shocking because of some of these contracts expiring sometime soon. And when you get a tackle round one, if they can, play at a top tier level for 4 years, that's, a lot of money you're saving as opposed to having to pay someone like Rasheed Walker, however much money that could possibly be. So all in all, I still think defense is a top need. But when you factor in potentially Rasheed Walker gone, potentially Sean Rhyan gone, I think they'll probably sign at least one of them in the future. That could make it there could be a little less depth at the offensive line position for the future. But if you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.